The night the grandfather clock stopped, Margaret knew something was wrong. It wasn't just the silence of the pendulum. It was the silence of the house itself. And from that moment, nothing in her life would ever be the same. Margaret had lived in the farmhouse for nearly 50 years. The walls carried laughter, tears, and whispers of generations. Every creak of the floorboards was familiar. Every shadow belonged to memory. But when the clock stopped at midnight, the house seemed to breathe differently, as if holding its secrets too tightly. She tried to ignore it. After all, clocks stop. But the next morning, the world began to shift. A letter arrived in the mailbox, addressed to her late husband, Henry. The radio played songs from decades past, ones she hadn't heard since her youth. And in the attic, she discovered a photograph she had never seen before, herself, standing beside a man who wasn't Henry. The discovery unsettled her. The man was Thomas, her first love, the one she had promised to meet at the train station all those years ago, but never did. From that day forward, the house seemed alive. The kitchen smelled of bread from her mother's oven, though she hadn't baked in years. The porch echoed with children's laughter, though her grandchildren lived far away. The attic whispered with forgotten promises. Margaret began to wonder if the clock had opened a doorway to memory, or whether time itself was unraveling. Each room revealed something. In the parlor, she found a stack of letters Henry had written but never sent. They spoke of his doubts, his sacrifices, and his devotion. In the bedroom, she heard the faint sound of Henry's voice, humming the lullaby he used to sing to their children. In the hallway, she saw shadows of her younger self, running with dreams too large for the small town she had chosen to stay in. The suspense grew heavier. Margaret wondered, had Henry regretted staying? Had she held him back from the life he once imagined? One evening, Margaret shared her discoveries with her granddaughter Emily. Emily was facing her own crossroads, torn between pursuing a career in another city or staying close to the man she loved. Together, they read the letters aloud. Margaret's voice cracked, but her heart grew lighter. She realized the letters weren't about regret at all. They were about devotion. They were about choosing love and building a life worth remembering. Emily listened, tears in her eyes. She understood now that sometimes the greatest journeys are not the ones we take, but the ones we choose to stay for. Margaret folded the letters gently, placed them back in the trunk, and whispered into the quiet attic, "Thank you." The house seemed to sigh with her, as if it too remembered the love that had built its walls. But the story did not end there. The clock remained silent, its pendulum frozen. Margaret sat before it night after night, waiting. She thought of Thomas, of Henry, of the choices that had shaped her life. She thought of Emily, and the choices yet to come. And slowly, she began to understand. The clock was not broken. It was waiting, waiting for her to accept the past, to embrace the present, and to release the future. The days grew longer, and Margaret found herself wandering through the farmhouse as if it were a museum of her own life. In the kitchen, she remembered the smell of Henry's morning coffee, the way he whistled while fixing the fence outside. In the living room, she saw the shadows of her children playing, their laughter echoing faintly in her ears. In the attic, she touched the photograph again, and for a moment, she felt Thomas's presence, not as regret, but as a reminder of the roads not taken. Emily visited often, and together they spoke of choices, of sacrifice, of love. Margaret told her stories of the past, of the hardships and joys, of the nights when Henry worked late and the mornings when they danced in the kitchen. Emily listened, absorbing the wisdom of a life lived fully, even if not perfectly. One evening, as the sun set behind the farmhouse, Margaret whispered again, "I chose Henry, and I would choose him again." At that moment, the pendulum began to swing. Midnight passed, and the house grew quiet. Margaret smiled. The past had spoken, but the present was hers to keep. The clock ticked steadily once more, each swing a heartbeat, each chime a reminder that time moves forward, but love endures. Margaret closed her eyes, listening to the rhythm, and felt peace settle over her. The house was no longer heavy with secrets. It was alive with memory, with devotion, with the echoes of choices that had built a family, a home, and a legacy. Emily sat beside her, holding her hand, and together they listened to the clock. It was not just a machine marking hours. It was a witness to their lives, a keeper of stories, a guardian of love. And as the night deepened, Margaret knew that the house where time had once stood still was now alive again, carrying her story forward into the hearts of those who would come after.